Good morning, and thank you for coming. As you know, today's 13th annual Johnny Nadherny Memorial Youth Symposium was canceled, but we are still going to provide the program as Community Television of Santa Cruz County is taping for future cablecast, and we will also make sure that we try to distribute it to everybody so they can take advantage of the day that should have been. I do want to take a moment just to acknowledge that there's been some devastation in Japan, and that's weighs heavy on our hearts. At this point, I don't think I need to ask the folks here to turn their cell phones off or anything like that. We're going to take the day one piece at a time, and I'd like to introduce at this point Joshua Nadherny Calciano.
Thank you, George, and good morning. Before I begin, I just want everyone to know that our thoughts and prayers are with those people in Japan. My family over these years have been incredibly gratified to have this symposium in memory of our brother and son, John, develop into the widely attended event of today. John was 23 years old when he passed away, and as difficult as our loss continues to be, the sense of the community coming together is a very healing force. Our deepest appreciation goes out to all those who have planned the details of each annual symposium year after year. We are particularly gratified and appreciative for the advisory committee. I have never met a more devoted, sensitive people that I'm honored to be a part of. The volunteers who also helped with planning today, and both the Dominican Hospital Foundation Guild and the foundation, which have established, with help, the Johnny Nadherny Calciano Memorial Youth Foundation Endowment. And of course to you for your devotion, particularly today, trying to get here and walking many miles, I'm sure. So we are deeply appreciative for that. My family has continued to be impressed by the diversity of the attendees, the clinicians, the counselors, educators, parents, and public safety officials that have attended the symposia year after year. The post-symposium comments and the number of attendees that return year after year tell us that we are making a real impact on our community. And now, in summary, I want to thank you for being a part of this event. And now, in the words of my mother, Linda, these symposiums are a wonderful legacy and give a real sense of purpose to John's life. Thank you. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Ron Slaby. Dr. Slaby is a developmental psychologist, scientist, and educator. Having served 25 years at the Harvard University as associate professor, lecturer, and National Merit Fellow, Dr. Slaby is currently a senior scientist with both Educational Developmental Center and the Center on Media and Child Health at Children's Hospital Boston and Harvard Medical School. Through his innovative research, teaching, and program development, Dr. Slaby has helped to shape our national and global strategies for preventing youth violence and bullying. Dr. Slaby has co-authored and presented to Congress the first national plan for preventing of violence in America for the CDC. He also co-authored 2 national reports on violence in youth for the American Psychological Association, as well as the globally distributed report on violence prevention in schools for the World Health Organization. Dr. Slaby has worked with educators, health practitioners, criminal justices, and justice professionals, and other behavioral scientists to develop violence prevention initiatives in Canada, Pakistan, Colombia, Uruguay, and Argentina. Known for introducing a bystander strategy for preventing violence and bullying. Dr. Slaby's publications include the CDC National Plan for Preventing Violence in America, the World Health Organization's Global Program for Preventing Violence in Schools, the American Psychological Association National Commission Reports on Violence in Youth, and the book entitled Early Violence Prevention, Tools for Teachers of Young Children, as well as the evidence-based violence prevention program, Aggressors, Victims, and Bystanders, and finally, the research-based multi-platform bullying prevention and program called Eyes on Bullying. So it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Slaby.
Thank you, Joshua, and thank you to all of you for coming to this videotaped portion of the program. I want to thank, first of all, the organizers of this symposium, Joshua and his parents, Linda and Tony, and also specifically want to thank George Jarrow for setting up and being flexible in preparing this symposium. I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak, and we're going to have, I think, a very interesting session, especially coming on the heels of the White House workshop that recently occurred, and in which President Obama and First Lady talked about bullying prevention, and the President talked about how he was bullied as a child. And the initiative, the national initiatives that are now being undertaken to deal with this very important challenge and opportunity of our age. I also wanted to thank Joshua for giving me that nice introduction, but particularly for pronouncing my name correctly. My name is Ron Slaby, but it's mispronounced Salby, Slabby, and Slobby. And it's a good Czech name from the Czech Republic. And for those of you who know names from the Czech Republic, you know you're getting off mighty easily, but the name is easy to pronounce as Slaby, coming from a country that has no respect for vowels. In fact, there once was a man from the Czech Republic who went to the eye doctor. And the eye doctor said, "Can you read the bottom line of that eye chart?" He said, "Not only can I read it, I know him personally." So my name is Ron Slaby, and I'm delighted to be here and to talk with you about facing this challenge that we have in our country of bullying and how to prevent it. And the opportunity that we have with the national attention we're getting, with the programs and practices, and with the research evidence that's available to make a big difference in the lives of our children going forward. Bullying prevention is a topic that I think you have already seen many stories about in the media. These deal with real children, real problems, complex issues, short and long-term consequences that are sometimes devastating, but there are also thoughtful solutions. And what I intend to do is to try to put together for you our two best types of thinking about bullying prevention. I would say our two best types of thinking come from, number one, the evidence of research, and number two, the wisdom of practice. So what we've tried to do is to build a bridge between these two best types of thinking. The evidence of research connecting with the wisdom of practice can help to prevent and even stop bullying. These are real people we're talking about. And in the White House workshop yesterday, the mother of Carl Joseph Walker Hoover on the left is calling for a national legislation on bullying prevention. Her son, 11 years old, was teased as being a newcomer to school, as being gay, and at 11 years old, he took his own life in what's now become a word that is coined in our language, a bullicide. Well, the government agencies don't really like this word because it's never fully clear that there is only one cause to a suicide. But in this case, we also know that there was a heavy influence of bullying that led to this young boy's despair to the point that he took his own life, writing a note that he loved his mother and his aunt, and that his 6-year-old brother might want his Pokemon toys to play with. We could go on and on about the many pictures and the many stories, but the stories all amount to the fact that bullying can be devastating and can have devastating consequences. I made the slide about 3 waves, no unfortunate maybe use of the word today, 3 waves in the epidemic of youth violence. And you can see that bullying has been involved and is underlying all of these waves. In the 1990s, we saw a wave of severe violence, primarily in the inner city, primarily among males, and largely linked to gang activities and to drug trafficking, as well as to territorial things and to the availability of handguns. The epidemic was of such high proportions that the Surgeon General called it an epidemic, and that we created at that time the first national plan for violence prevention through the Centers for Disease Control. In that plan, we called for a number of factors that since then have been dealt with to some degree. But you see, as a wave comes crashing in on us in an epidemic form, it is the most vulnerable in our society that are the first victims. The most vulnerable being probably the urban minority males. When we did an analysis of the death rate due to homicide in the United States at that time in 1992, we found that 1 in 27 black males in the United States were scheduled to die by having someone kill them, excluding suicide, excluding death in the line of law enforcement, or death in the line of military service. 1 in 27, and it was the single biggest cause of death. And typically it was an early death, youngsters. Also, at that time, it was the leading cause of death for African American females as well, and a very severe problem for white males and white females. We said this is of epidemic proportions, but there are things we can do to begin to turn that around. And we began to turn it around, but the second wave came in on us. As you might expect with an epidemic, where an epidemic spreads to the second most vulnerable group. And the second most vulnerable group were the white males in suburbia. And we saw a rash of school shootings. Columbine being the most famous one, but we had Paducah, Kentucky, we had Jonesboro, we had a wide variety of school shootings. In almost all cases, well, in 75% of the cases, the Secret Service found, however, that the school shooters had been bullied and had been sometimes severely bullied. And sometimes that seemed to be what directly led to the revengeful school shootings that occurred. I can remember being called after the incident in Paducah, Kentucky, in which a young man met with his students before school and killed them. And the reporter was asking me what my comment would be, and he was reading a wire story that had just broke. He said, "What do you think is the basis for this?" Well, normally it's a bad idea to make comments until you know more about it, but he read directly from the wire story. And I said 2 things. I kind of stuck my neck out, making a prediction. I said, number 1, I would imagine that nothing even close to this has ever happened in this community and in its entire history. It is so bizarre, what you're telling me, compared to real life in this community. But number 2, it is so almost trite and often presented in the media that it sounds like this is a media movie. A movie of which I could name many that have this same scenario. I think the media might be involved. And secondly, the media influences on this young man. And secondly, I can't imagine that he would carry out a plan like this without someone having known about it earlier, without having him told someone, especially in the middle school and beyond, in the high schools. Well, it turned out by the time I got home and turned on the television set, there were already bystanders who were saying, yes, we knew about it, but we had heard about it, but we didn't think it was real. And later on, a week later, it was found that he had been watching Basketball Diaries, which is a film with Leonardo DiCaprio with a fantasy in which he takes revenge on all of his classmates under the influence of drugs by shooting and killing them in class. So what I'm suggesting is that there are events in the society that are that lead to potential preventable actions that can be taken. And I'm going to talk about what some of those are. The third wave is a wave whereby females are brought into it as well. And we now know about the mean girls concept. There's even a very popular movie that was made called Mean Girls. And we see that also that with females being involved, there are both male and female victims that are called for the first time bullicides, because it was so heavily related to bullying. So we see through this 3 steps of the waves coming in on our youth and involving the most vulnerable, then spreading further, and then spreading even further than that. So that we now have a question of who is safe from this bullying. How can we stop it? Is it your child and mine? Is it spreading that far? Now I'd like to ask you one question. How many of you yourselves were bullied as a child, when you were a child? Raise your hand if you. Okay, most people are raising your hands. How many of you were cyberbullied as a child? Too old. There's one person, and she is the youngest person in the room, probably. So I just wanted to make that point, that bullying has extended itself into beyond the school walls or the bus or the walk home, into the bedroom, into the computer room, into the home, in such a way that a child who is being bullied can never fully be free of it. And the technology has permitted bullying to happen, but to be extended in a similar form, but in a way that permits even greater extensive bullying. I want to give you a bit of a global perspective as well on bullying. It's not only in the United States. I don't know if you can read those different countries, but these are the percentage of school children reported in 2002, 2003 to the World Health Organization. And by the way, there are new data coming out soon. I can't wait to see what changes there may have been made. But as you see, the red lines are the females, the girls, and the blue lines are the boys, and those are countries, and there are 30 countries involved. And the United States, on this scale, in 2002 and 3, were 12th among these 30 countries in the extent to which direct bullying was experienced. The question was, how often have you been bullied or bullied others or observed bullying? Now that's direct bullying. That does not include a whole category that I'll talk about of indirect bullying, of exclusion, of gossip, of behind your back kinds of bullying that also is probably more extensive with girls. But as you see, we're 12th, which isn't that good. I don't know what you see in these data, but what I see is opportunity. And what Lithuania, which is the top bullying country, according to these data, they were embarrassed by this, and at the last World Health Organization in Geneva, they said, we saw that there was no reason why we should have that much bullying when Sweden or the Czech Republic, at the bottom of this scale, have 1/4 the amount that we do. There's no reason why we need to be embarrassed at the top of this scale, and besides, have all this bullying going on. We can do something about it it is changeable. And so they've actually begun to take bullying prevention seriously in Lithuania, and they've already begun to see changes made. We were 12th then. It will be interesting to see what level we would be in the new data that are coming out. What does this translate into? Almost 30% of children experience bullying each year. More than 5.7 million youth in grades 6 through 10 in the United States alone were involved in moderate to frequent bullying during the current school term, either as a bully, a victim, or both. And each day, what does it cost us? What does it cost the children? It costs them education, because 160,000 youth stay home from school for fear of being bullying each day. And that's probably an underestimate, because many children will not tell you the reason why they want to stay home, but it really has to do with not feeling welcome, or worse yet, of being bullied in school. That's the bad news. This is the good news. These are the bullying basics. This is what research, fortunately, that we've been doing all along, and the United States has been in many ways leading the pack in terms of prevention research and an opportunity to change and stop bullying before it starts, or to stop it once it is in force, or once it is taking hold. These are the bullying basics. Bullying is not pre-wired, harmless, or inevitable. You'll hear all kinds of excuses. Boys are just boys, and now we hear girls are just girls, and that's what they're going to do. No matter what, you can't change them. Wrong. Bullying instead is learned, it's harmful, and it is controllable. Anything that is learned can be unlearned. Of course, it's better not to be learned in that form in the first place, but alternatives can be learned in the first place. That makes it even easier if you start earlier. Bullying spreads if it's supported or if it's left unchecked. And that's the case where if bullying is allowed to happen, you can expect more of it. If it's not stopped. Bullying involves everyone, bullies, victims, and bystanders. And I'll pay particular attention to the bystanders and the strategy that emerges once you understand how important the role of bystander is. Bullying can be effectively stopped or entirely prevented. That's the good news. So what are we to do? First of all, let's understand what it is we're talking about. What is bullying? Well, it's physical or emotional abuse that has three components to it. The first one is terrible. It's deliberate. It's deliberate. Bullies intend to hurt their victim. If a child is simply taking a basketball because they want the basketball from the child, or taking a toy, that's an instrumental act of aggression. That's not bullying, necessarily. If that child, however, is doing it in order to hurt, because they like the other child not having the ball, because they get pleasure out of putting that other child down, of hurting that child by pushing them or threatening them, intimidating them, getting to cry, that is intentional. That is the deliberate component of bullying that we find so horrible to think about that we can't even imagine our own children doing that. And yet our own children are doing that. For every time there's a bullying incident, there's a bully. There is a child who is acting in this way. Parents find it difficult to think, well, what can I do then to stop my child from being a bully? They almost never begin there. Instead, they think of their child as being a potential victim. They don't think at all of their child being a bystander who could help have prevented it or stopping it. Bullying is also repeated. What a bully does is targets the same victim repeatedly. Why? Because the victim is submissive, is giving them what they want, is crying, is giving over the toy, is not fighting back, is showing all of the body language of someone who is being victimized. When studies are done, you find that a child who is victimized by one bully You can take that child sometimes and put them in another school, and they're likely to be victimized in that school as well, if they've been trained to be a victim who submits consistently. Bullies, and this is the most important part, is bullying involves a power imbalance. The bullies select victims that they see as being less powerful and more vulnerable. Well, let's look at, I would have to say, this deliberate bullying. What worse lesson could you think to teach our next generation than that hurting someone else is pleasurable? So bullying is a challenge of our generation, and yet it's an opportunity to make changes. Let's look at the essence of bullying. What does it come down to, and how can we understand and think about it? Let's contrast two different kinds of actions. The first I'm calling assertive act of compassion, assertive acts of compassion. Why do I say assertive? Because it takes the kind of courage and the assertiveness to speak up and to not be silent. Assertiveness has benefits in our society in all kinds of ways, and unless you're assertive, sometimes you can get taken advantage of. And an act of compassion, that means that you recognize that the victim doesn't deserve to be victimized, that the victim is another human being. The victim is somebody who you can stand up for. But bullying also starts with the power imbalance. Both of these actions, both of these acts, either the assertive act of compassion or the bullying, start with a power imbalance. And we would like to think, idealistically, that when a child walks into a schoolroom or a youth center, that everyone is equal, that there's equal power, equality among all. We preach this, we talk about it as though that's what happens when a child walks into a schoolroom. There's nothing really further from the truth, because what a child sees immediately when they walk into any group of peers is they see imbalances. What would be some of the ways that a child might perceive that they don't have as much power as somebody who is in the group that they walk into? Anybody? Size. Immediately, a child walks into school, first time, they're smallest. They see the older grades, they see kids who are bigger. They see kids maybe who are stronger. What else? What other dimensions? Yes?
I think it depends on the age group of the children. Like you said, for younger children, probably in size, but as you get into high school and middle school, it probably has to go with social standing.
Yes. So you see that social standing, you're talking about maybe popularity, you're talking about different sources of power. What else? Race. Race immediately determines, in many of our communities, differences that are perceived because our adult society makes these distinctions. And because there are power imbalances already in our adult society that kids learn and pick up on. And so they immediately see power differences based on race and or ethnicity. What else? Perceived sexual identity. This becomes a very important, especially in the middle school years. It is the basis for the 11-year-old that you just saw, Carl Joseph Walker Hoover, committing suicide, one of the bases. And as we'll talk about, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, sexual orientation, when it's perceived, true or not, it can be a way of perceiving a power imbalance and therefore picking on the vulnerable. What else? Yes?
You see people in a group, and you're coming, and there's nobody available for you to join a group, and the groups are all like coherent and
Right.
that's intimidating.
So friends versus stranger. Cliques, you see that there's popularity and friendships that are already probably inherent in any group that you're walking into. And so if you're the odd person out, you're potentially, again, less powerful. So there are all kinds of ways that you can be less powerful. But that doesn't make for bullying. That alone is simply the reality that we all face in our society, different levels of power. But the difference comes that in an assertive act of compassion, you deliberately and repeatedly use that power to help and empower the vulnerable. This is what we would like to see, I think, our children learning. Acts of kindness that are assertive and compassionate, where they stand up for and use the power that they have to make friends with the child who doesn't have a friend, to help that child who's being picked on to stand up against the bullying, to include them in the group, to empower them in various ways by talking about playing up to their strengths. That's what we would like to see our children learning and doing and modeling for others. Unfortunately, what bullies do is they deliberately and repeatedly abuse that power to hurt the vulnerable. Now, we'd like to teach our children, I think you've heard the expression, that to whom much is given, much is expected. Many of our kids have much given to them. They have much that they gain power from, that they gain access and opportunity from. But this phrase, I think some of us connected with, say, the Kennedys or other rich families. No, it connects with all of us. Our children have many opportunities, and there are many ways in which they gain power. What we would like to teach them is that they have an opportunity to use that power, not to exploit somebody because they can and abuse them, as bullies do, but instead to act compassionately and assertively to help empower those who are less powerful than they are. That's a society that would be healthy. That's a society that would take advantage of everyone's skills and opportunities. That's a society that would be cohesive and not divisive. That's a society that would not have bullying as a basis for concerns and presentations like this one. So we have an opportunity and we have a challenge. Different types of bullying. I said there's physical bullying, occurs more often among boys. There's verbal bullying, includes, for both boys and girls, often includes teasing, and then there's indirect bullying. The indirect bullying can begin as early as 3 years of age, or maybe even earlier, and it occurs often among girls to a greater extent. Girls are socialized to see that their gender role doesn't permit them to be directly violent or aggressive. It's inconsistent, it's inappropriate for girls to, many girls, and they get this message early on. But you can do it behind someone's back. That's indirect. You can say, "Oh, is that an ugly sweater?" Just kidding, just kidding. And then you're not being hostile by doing that. Because I'm just kidding. No, I didn't really mean that. Or you can start rumors and so on. And often girls are focusing those on the looks of or the popularity of the other girls. This is Carmen's story. Carmen is sitting at a table with Vicky and with a bunch of other girls in the kindergarten classroom. This is a true story. The names are changed. Those aren't their real pictures. But they're sitting at a table, to give you an illustration of this indirect kind of bullying, starting in kindergarten. Actually, I think it might have been earlier, in four-year-olds. Vicky all the kids are eating, and Vicky says, "How many like pizza?" And all the girls raise their hand. "How many like ice cream?" Everybody raises their hand. "How many like Carmen?" And she keeps her hand down, and all the other kids keep their hand down, and Carmen starts to cry at the end of the table. Think of what's going on here. This is early manipulation. This is using the bystanders in a Simon Says kind of game to trap them into saying they don't like Carmen when they actually probably do like Carmen. It's a leader saying, "I'm so powerful, I can get you to say you don't like Carmen in front of her and to make her cry and to be happy about it because I'm exercising my power. I can show how powerful I am. Now, Vicky has talent as a bully. If she could put that talent instead to assertive acts of, she's already assertive, but if she could put that to assertive acts of compassion toward others, imagine what she could do if we could turn her around. Where does bullying learned? Where does it come from? School teachers say, yeah, well, I get that in my classroom. Vicky just came into my classroom, and suddenly I have to face Vicky manipulating all the other girls. Where did she get that? Or a boy coming in, and he's suddenly picking fights with every kid, with the vulnerable kids, and secretly is pummeling them, and you don't even, out of range of the teacher's eye, and suddenly you find out about it. Where does this come from? Well, it comes from the social worlds that the child grows up in. And first and foremost is the world of the family. That's that purple circle that you see over in the left, the purplish blue circle. It's actually blue, I guess. And what we see, though, is that there are other circles, the spheres of influence of a child. Not to be missed is the one at the bottom, the media circle. And then there's the community, there's the school setting, and there are the peers. Well, what happens? That little girl in the middle is my daughter there, or maybe it's your daughter, or maybe it's your son. I have 2 daughters, so it's one of them. And what happens in the life of a child? Well, they navigate among these social worlds on a daily basis. So a child might wake up, in some households, the television is already on, and so they watch television. And they're with their family. Maybe have breakfast, maybe not. They're off to school. On the way there, they're walking with or in a bus with peers. So they're in the peer circle. Then they go to school. They might face bullying in the school that the teacher doesn't see. They maybe go to a soccer game afterwards, or a community activity of some kind. And then they return home, and then it's more media, and it's more family time, and then maybe it's being on the computer with iMessaging or with texting to your peers throughout the day, so you're really connected with them. So a child is going back and forth among each of these circles every day. This is a child's world, and it's a world of every day interconnecting all of these social worlds. Where do they learn bullying? Well, families teach, and first and foremost, that's where they typically learn. You'll get Vicky probably learned this at home, this kind of skill in manipulating and bullying others. Through interaction, it could be through example of the parents, or the siblings, the role models within that household. Or it could be through direct interaction. In fact, I'll give you an example in a second of a direct interaction that teaches bullying and coerces the child to become a bully. Through discipline. Discipline is often thought of as solving a problem, or it ought to be to solve a problem, but typically when a discipline is harsh and punitive, it's going to add to the problem of bullying. It's going to help create it. Through stories that are told. There are family stories that are passed along. And again, these either talk about compassion toward others, or they talk maybe about putting others down and liking it, and taking pride in doing that. Or through responses to bullying. When bullying is seen, what do the parents do? They say, oh, boys will be boys, let them fight in the back seat. By the time we get there, they'll have it all worked out. Or through responses to the media. In some households, children are watching and playing with interactive violent media. Our military is recruiting. Call to Duty is one of the most used interactive video games right now. And I don't know if you saw the report this morning in the news, but a young man in New Bedford committed suicide. He had just been playing Call of Duty. I don't know if there's a connection or not. That's exactly what he was doing, though, just before committing suicide. So that some parents say, well, you know, they know the difference between fantasy and reality. It's okay if they watch that professional wrestling. They know it's not real. But do they know that not only is it not real, is it set up as it's not a match, it's a performance? Do they realize that the wrestlers aren't even professional wrestlers, they're violent stuntmen? Do they realize that the referee is not a referee, but an actor who pretends to be a referee who can't control the situation? Do they realize that the girlfriend is not the girlfriend, but is probably playing one of her toughest acting roles that they're fighting over? Do they realize that the announcers are not announcers? They're scripted and improvisational announcing about what's going on that they know they're going to hype on air and make it seem worse than it is. Kids don't know that, even though they say, well, I know wrestling isn't real. I think it isn't. And sometimes the fathers who watch with the children will say, oh, I guess I knew that it wasn't real. Maybe they don't even realize it. But in any case, it's modeling bullying and violence. This is a true story. My colleague and friend, Dr. Peter Stringham, pediatrician in East Boston Community Health Center, told me this. One of his patients is a mother who came in and said, you know, I'm dealing with bullying. Let me tell you, she was very happy to tell him this story. She says, I know how to handle it. This is a mother who is a single mother. She was victimized as a child and battered as an adult. She was the victim of bullying. She was also got into a relationship and she was beaten as an adult. And her daughter comes home, 6-year-old daughter, comes home and says, what's wrong? And she said, well, this other girl was beating me up or something, was bullying me in the playground. And the mother got all furious, but she knows bullying, so she's going to teach her child a lesson. She said, well, go beat her up. And the girl said, well, no, I can't. She's bigger than me, I'm afraid. So she marches her daughter out to the front porch. She steps in and locks the screen door and talks to her through the screen door. And she says, you come back with her 2 front teeth or you don't get into this house again, and locks the door and leaves it. She waits about an hour and here's a soft knock on the door. It's the girl. She doesn't know whether she's going to get back into the house or not because she only has half of a bloody tooth to show. The mother lets her in, and no sooner did she come in than there's a telephone call. Guess what? It's the other mother calling her. And on the phone in front of her child, she shouts the other mother down, saying, you get me and I'll get you worse. Threatens her. She says, that's how you handle bullying. She saw that it wasn't going over very well with her pediatrician and realized, well, what else could be done here? And what you see is very important to realize because we're seeing adults not just teaching children. In this case, you would have to call it coercion, that the mother is coercing her child at the threat of abandonment to go out and become a bully after being a victim. And that the only way to handle it is there are only 2 choices, submission or counterattack. If you read most children's books, you'll see throughout our literature only 2 choices, submission, counterattack, lick them or join them. Isaac Asimov, the famous science fiction writer, says, violence is a poverty of thought. Violence is a poverty of thought. And that's what's being shown here, is there are about 1,000 things that could be done, the 2 extremes of which are submission and counterattack. But those whole middle 998 options fall into the range of assertiveness of various kinds. Avoidance, speaking up, getting more friends, negotiating, doing something, getting more power, there's all kinds of ways, and we'll talk about all those ways, but what this parent is showing is she has been trained as a victim in our society to think like the bully thinks, which is there's only 2 choices, what the bully would want her to think. And now she's passing it along across generations to her next child, and guess what this child is going to pass along to her child unless something changes. So let's talk about a little bit about the dynamics of this teaching model. And now that we've seen what the family can do, we also want to point out that peers teach. Siblings are one kind of peer in the family. They're both in the family, but they're also kids. But you see that bullying involves and is, it really needs, it depends upon having a bully victim and typically bystanders as well. Sometimes bullying is done for the sake of the audience of bystanders. Sometimes it wouldn't happen if there were no audience. So we have to begin to think about peer influences from these three perspectives, and I'll get into that a bit more. But I want to point out that schools teach also. Schools now have violence prevention programs that the U.S. Department of Education, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, U.S. Department of Justice, and other departments have already examined to see if they're evidence-based, if they have evidence behind them, that they work. And these lists are available, and the White House is putting these practices online, and you can join in by going to the government website and looking at these practices, and you can see which ones might work for your children in various settings. Most of them, however, are school-based. So you have school teachers, 45 states have now been called upon to now have anti-bullying laws. In most cases, teachers are becoming mandated reporters of bullying, just as they have in 1960s, when child abuse and neglect was first, the battered child syndrome was first coined, the term in 1961. After that, there was a movement to get teachers to become mandated reporters to the child health services and family services to investigate child abuse and neglect. They're becoming mandated reporters again for bullying. And 45 states, as I said, have already passed legislation. The rest are, many of them already, the other 5, many of them already have legislation pending now. And that's all within the last, say, 10 years. School teachers teach, and they do it by example, role modeling, again, pretty much the same as in families, through direct interaction, through discipline, through stories, through responses, through curriculum and programs. For example, there are now the laws that are, say, you need to use these programs, and through building a school climate and safety. Ron Indra is going to be talking about school safety in this community after this presentation. And the school safety that is taking hold in many parts of the country. I'm working with 112 sites that have a Safe Schools, Healthy Students grant from the 3 federal agencies, Justice, Education, and Health and Human Services, to completely redo their school districts to be safer and for their kids to be healthier. So the government, starting during the school shooting period, they realized that they need to help the schools with this new mandate. I'm hoping that there'll be funding for these 45 anti-bullying state laws that have been funded, but by and large there's none. So schools are being asked to do something and not given fully the resources for training or for carrying it out or for developing new policies by and large. But there are some programs that are doing that, and I commend them, and I hope there'll be more with the national attention that bullying is now getting. So schools teach. But, oops, remember our child spends more time with the media than it does with the school teacher. Remember the going back and forth? Children come home and they're on the media. They're watching television. They're playing interactive video games. They're texting. They're involved, and guess what the media is teaching? By and large, with some exceptions that I'll talk about, and I think this is a valuable tool that needs to be used, is to use the media to turn this around. Like the streaming workshop that happened yesterday in the White House, or like the programs that we are now beginning to see for bullying prevention, But by and large, what you see in most of the media that children are exposed to is the medias teach, but they do so whether by design or by default. They don't consider themselves to be teachers. They're entertainers. At least many programs think of themselves in that way. Whether the curriculum is planned or unplanned, whether geared to entertain or to educate. My colleague and friend Peggy Charon was given the Freedom Award during the Clinton administration for having marshaled the support to pass the Children's Television Act of 1996, in which television stations were for the first time required to present programming to serve the educational and informational interest of children. That's the way the law reads. Both in the programming and in the community outreach that can enhance the value of that programming. They agreed to a certain amount of time. I think it's an hour and a half a week, a minimal amount of time. But notice this does not say you're required to enhance the entertainment programming. There's plenty of that. Some stations tried to get their license renewed by saying, well, it's the Flintstones and the Jetsons is our educational and informational programming. Didn't fly. Is that anthropology and science fiction? What is this? And you see that they had to create new educational programming for children in order to maintain their licenses at license renewal time. So there is a small movement, but we're talking about an hour and a half a week compared to the rest of the programming primarily. You also see that they're programming whether the audience age is appropriate or not for the content. The audience is whoever, whenever. There have been some rule makings to try to get certain kinds of programming that involve violence to be put on later at night so that children, young children, could be protected from that. There's also, having the V chip, the violence chip. It's so complicated that I don't know of any parent who uses the V chip. But the concept behind it was that give parents control. If that's what you're saying, it's the parent's responsibility, at least give them the control to know whether something is going to be violent or not. And by the way, the industry rates their own violence, and a colleague of mine, you may have seen her in Good Morning America, was pointing out that the industry's ratings are totally useless, totally useless. Underestimates violence, does not pin it down. It has nothing really directly to do with accurate information. It's the industry, it's the fox guarding the hen house. So parents are left with ratings that don't work, with V-chips they can't use, and with an hour and a half of programming a week on many stations. And they're left with PBS. And PBS is now part of what the government is saying we should not fund. So where do things stand? We know what's needed. We know what we should be calling for is healthful programming, informational, educational programming, particularly as it relates to bullying prevention for kids. And yet here's what we see. The media lessons are often false. My concern with the media violence is not that it's showing violence, it's that it's showing false images of violence. It's showing them as though they're inevitable and pre-wired and funny and harmless and deserved and effective, and they're in the hands of the good guys. And let me just contrast the tale of two teachers here. Let's contrast the school teacher and the media teacher. Now remember, this is that little girl in that center circle is exposed to both teachers in the same day, every day, except during the summer. Then it's only the media teacher. Or on weekends, it's only the media teacher. But let's compare the school teacher and the media teacher nevertheless. What you see is that the school teacher has a little bit of teaching time and the media teacher has lots. They have a small budget, media has large budgets. Reaches few children? No, it reaches millions of children. In the media, it's one source of input versus many sources of input. Interactive, online as well. Examples are spoken, typically in the classroom. They're graphically illustrated and portrayed in the media. It's child-centered and it's profit-centered in the media. Bullying is disapproved versus being glorified. And the lessons are accurate versus being false. So all in all, we have the media and the school teacher often competing for the hearts and minds of our children, and it isn't a level playing field. The media has more power, often with our children, than does the school. So we have the family, we have the peers, we have the media, we have the school, the peers, the school, and the media. Children learn 3 different effects from the media. This is based on research that the Surgeon General has verified and is one of the most heavily studied of all. You can call them the bully, the victim, and the bystander effect. Of increased, we know that watching media violence, especially when it's unrealistically portrayed, especially for those children who see it as realistic and who also identify with the aggressor. You have a child who's watching Halloween 21 after watching Halloween 1 through 20, and they're identifying with the aggressor. You have a child that you ought to start paying attention to way before that, because the effect is biggest on those who are most vulnerable to identifying with the aggressor and to buying the message, the false message, as being relevant for your own lives and somewhat realistic. We have the victim effect of increased fearfulness from the media, more mean world beliefs, that the other guy is out to get you. And because of that, the only way I can protect myself is with a gun or a knife. And to assume that the other person's intentions are to hurt you. And by doing that, sometimes creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have the bystander effect as well. Watching media violence leads to a physiological change. When you see violence in real life, you don't respond with the same heart rate and sweating response as you do if you haven't seen those violent videos previously. And there's one study whereby children were exposed to SWAT team video or to a nature film in which there was violence, but it was violence among nature animals. Natural violence, if you want to call it that. And afterwards, these 2 groups were taken to the next room and said, you know, you're going to be in charge of watching these kids in the next room. If anything goes wrong, call me. I'm going to be down the hall. And they showed them a closed circuit, what they thought was closed circuit television. They were introduced to the 2 kids beforehand, and they were watching what they thought was a camera into the next room. But it actually was a video that showed the exact same thing to both groups. There was a 3rd group, too, that had no film before that. But what happened after this film? Well, first of all, during the film, if you're going to look, you'll see heart rates go up and so on. But afterwards, what happened is they were watching the kids, and they start to argue. They start to push and shove. And they start to fight. And then they start throwing things and hitting each other, and the camera falls over, and you hear a clunk in the next room. And these kids are fighting, for all you know, and the kids believe that it's happening. So the question is, if anything goes wrong, come and get me. Well, is this wrong enough to go and get the adult? Well, if you've watched the violent video beforehand, it's not wrong. Those children sat there for 15 minutes after the camera had fallen over and they had heard screams and shouts in the other room and then silence, and they're still sitting there. They would be still sitting there if the study wasn't stopped. The children who saw the nature violence, they were pretty quick. As it escalated, they went down the hall and they said, you know, better come. They're fighting in the next room. So there's a desensitization to the bystander effect that sets kids up to watch and do nothing. That's not as bad as the media I saw last night. Why should I intervene? When Jonesboro shooting occurred, they said, I thought it was like a movie. This youngster was, I think, hit 37 of his 42 shots, and he was shooting girls. And they were running from, and they had pulled the cleverly, if you want to consider it that, they had pulled the alarm, and they knew which doors the kids were going to come out so that they could hide in the woods and pick them off. And this kid was heavily involved in violent media. And the kids who were bystanders there said, this is like a bad movie, but maybe not even as bad as what I saw last night. So the media has a role to play, and I think we need to pay attention to that. Here's the Center on Media and Child Health. This is a resource for you. It's available free to everyone. It's a center we started at Children's Hospital in Boston, and we decided media affects children's health in all kinds of ways, but it's all scattered. The literature is scattered, and there's no way that a parent can really kind of ask a question. Has there ever been anything done between TV viewing by adolescent girls and their body image and eating disorders? You can ask that question, and it'll show you your logic model. It'll show you whether you're asking for causality or for relationships. It'll know that when you say adolescent girls, it means females and teenagers. It understands all that. And it'll give you your answer with all the studies that are available. We gathered, and there are 2,200 studies in our database of 8,600 citations in the master database. You can enter this through the portal of a mentor, either a parent or teacher, where it's written for you, or a researcher, where it's written for you. So you get the statistics. If parents don't necessarily want the statistics, they want to know the conclusions. So you can enter and make use of www.cmch.tv. You can also post a question to Dr. Michael Rich, my colleague, who's a pediatrician and with an unusual history. He studied with Kurosawa, the famous Japanese director who did Rashomon and others. And he studied filming, and he makes use of kids doing their own video as part of the, to deal with asthmatics and so on, so they can show you their environment and what it's like to undergo when the asthma attack starts and so on. So he uses video interactively with kids using the video, but he also calls himself the mediatrician. Not the pediatrician, not the media person, but the mediatrician. And you can ask the mediatrician questions and you'll get responses. So we're also doing a whole set of research in an interdisciplinary way through this center, Center on Media and Child Health. Media also enables, by the way, cyberbullying. I won't go into this too much except to say there's a new program that in Amarillo, Texas, they're doing cyberbullying, and they coined the term, I happened to say in one of my talks, kids have to realize that when they post a message, it's forever and it's for everyone. And so that's the name of the project now, the Forever Project, with a 4 in front of it. And the kids in Amarillo, Texas are learning what the consequences are of posting things like nude pictures, or like, which the media calls sexting, or like cyberbullying in various ways. Question, I already asked you this question, how many were cyberbullied? We had one person here who was cyberbullied. Okay, now let's get into what are some of the consequences for bullying. Well, we tend to think of the consequences of the victim, but there's more questions to ask, because bullying has consequences for the bully as well. Bullies, if not stopped, end up fighting, stealing, drinking, truancy, academic problems, dropping out, weapons use, criminal behavior. They also, both girls and boys, now the longitudinal data shows that if they're not stopped, that female and males become batterers in their domestic relationships. Bullies are in trouble. They're on a pathway toward a violent life, but they can be changed. They shouldn't be demonized. They're kids too. They can be educated. They have certain skills. As we saw, Vicky has certain skills. It can be channeled into other ways, especially if it's stopped early. Boys who bully in grades 6 through 9 are more likely to be convicted of crime at age 24. For victims, There's increased depression, truancy, dropping out, academic problems, revenge shootings, and bulicides. So the extremes are the two extremes that they sometimes take. Is they become counter-aggressive with school shootings or other ways, or they take their own lives, or both, by the way. Consider that almost all of the school shooters have committed suicide. Consider also that the diary records, which you may not have heard about, from the Columbine shooters, was that their plan, which went awry right to begin with, because the explosives didn't go off, which were going to be a diversion tactic that would allow them to have more time. Their plan was to shoot and kill as many as they could, and then to hijack a plane and to take it to New York City and to crash it, guess where? Not into the World Trade Center, into Times Square. This was several years before 9/11. The Columbine shooters developed this plan. So you see that bullying can lead to suicide as well, of the bullies, as well as hurting as many people as possible. Their bullying consequences are severe then, and 75% of school shooters were previous victims of bullying, the Secret Service reports. Bullying consequences are severe for bystanders also. You might say, well, wait a minute, they weren't involved. Well, there's fear, there's callousness, there's disempowerment, there's the belief that bullying works. Sometimes bystanders feel terribly guilty, as in one girl who's going around the country after the shooting in Lake Worth Middle School in Florida. She says, I heard that he was going back for the gun. I should have said something. I couldn't believe it when he came and killed Mr. Gruneau, the beloved teacher. And why didn't I say something? Well, she also says, if I had said something, however, I don't know whether the adults would have done anything about it. So what that says is that, wait a minute, the kids are direct bystanders, but we are secondary bystanders. If we hear about it, what are we prepared to do to stand up against bullying? If it falls on deaf ears, we're discouraging the reporting of bullying. If we botch it up, if we do it in a way that doesn't work, like shouting down the other mother, we're encouraging bullying. So we have to be prepared ourselves and empowered ourselves to understand what bullying is and how to deal with it. And that's what I want to get onto. We've already gone through the first half of this, more than the first half of this program. We've looked at the characteristics of bullying, how to recognize it, the players, and the consequences. What I want to do, and is the most important part, and keeps with a pledge that I made when I first worked on the CDC's National Plan for Violence Prevention, is I said I'm never going to talk about the problem of violence in any form without simultaneously in the same presentation talking about the solution. Because if you just get people falling into despair about the problem, you've done a disservice. Because violence is preventable, bullying is preventable, and I want to show you how. So we're going to talk about how to empower ourselves, empower our youth, and provide other ongoing support. And then I'll be done and I'll turn this over. One way, we've created something that's needed in the field, and we call it Eyes on Bullying. It's available free to you. And we very carefully chose the term because we wanted to show those eyes of the children, because we also wanted to engage your eyes as the adults, because we wanted you to be looking ahead, because we wanted you to consider onlookers, bystanders, because we wanted you to sharpen your eyes to seeing bullying where you might otherwise miss it, and to seeing it through different eyes. So have your own eyes on bullying. This is available online, and we decided, you can just go to this and you'll find a number of things I'll point out to you that are useful. And what we did was we found that there are lots of school-based programs, but almost none that are designed for you folks, parents, teachers, who are after-school teachers, or youth workers, or law enforcement personnel that have a chance to work with kids, or grandparents, or aunts and uncles, to work with kids either individually or in groups. What can you do to extend the impact of what's being done in the schools, to enhance it? Maybe to take control of the media at the same time. So we have a number of resources available to you that we created and gave away free. My colleague Kim Story is right now, as we speak, talking to 350 people in Springfield, Massachusetts, which is the home of where Carl Joseph Walker Hoover lived, the one who we saw committed suicide due to bullying, and who the president has honored the mother and taken to the White House. And so there's need all over. And I'm going to check with her afterwards and find out how her session went. But interestingly, it's preschool teachers there who are very interested. They're getting the message. The earlier you intervene, the easier it is. It's never too late, however, but it can be much more difficult, or much, much, much more difficult if you wait too long. And by the way, by waiting, you're guaranteeing a tragedy. You're guaranteeing abuse by waiting for it to happen till later. So why not get started early? This is funded by the IBM Global Work-Life Fund. So in order to fully disclose our sources of funding, they came to us and said, do you want to do this for IBM workers worldwide? We have a program to connect their family life, their home life, with their work life. And the key issue they want dealt with is bullying prevention. We said, yes, we can do it if we can give it away free to everybody. Why do you want to just save it for IBM employees? Why not give it away? It's available to everyone at no cost. And it has these different resources. It has a website. It has teleseminars. We did 3 national public radio style interviews on 3 different topics for children of different ages. First the young children, then the middle-aged children with cyberbullying, and then the older children with camp and youth programs. The American Camping Association now is interested in our program. The nursing associations, we're getting lots of interest from a wide variety of other sources, boys and girls clubs, etc. There's also a toolkit, and the toolkit is probably the most important tool that you have. You can download 42-page toolkit with 6 skills building activities, and I'll tell you what they do, what they're designed to do. They're designed only to get you a start on this, but you have other resources that can allow you to read further and to connect with other programs in bullying prevention. Adults can use this with either an individual child or groups of children. They can use it with children of preschool age on up through high school age with just a minimal modification of the tasks. The target audience is all caregivers, as I said, parents, grandparents, teachers, nurses, coaches, mentors, camps, counselors, youth educators. For children, it's for all children of various backgrounds, age levels, settings. And the unique approach is that it takes a prevention approach to see bullying early, to see it before it escalates, to see bullying through the eyes of the players, to see the effects, to look ahead, and then a bystander approach, which I'm going to explain more in a minute. The power and pivotal role of bystanders and how you can be either a helpful or hurtful bystander. And then it takes a research-guided, all of it is research-guided, so that it's connecting, as I said at the outset, the building a bridge between the evidence of research and the wisdom of practice, but trying to make it very user-friendly. You can download this and print it out in color. You can do it in black and white. You can do it like some school districts do. They want to do the first page in color, looks pretty cool, and all the rest in black and white, save a little money. You can use it at home. When we tested it with parents, some of our parents, we loved the comments that they gave us. One father said his wife wanted to read it, and he said, no, I have it now. You get a chance after I'm done. I couldn't put it down. I couldn't put it down. I just couldn't put it down. He's applying it now with his kids. So I don't know if it will work for you. We hope it will. These are some of the misdirections of bullying prevention and intervention. The zero tolerance policies of student exclusion, kicking a child out because they're a bully, is not going to solve the problem. Zero tolerance sounds like a good idea, but what it amounts to is laying blame and getting rid of the problem. The conflict resolution is not what it's about. There are not two equal parties that need to negotiate a solution where they both have an equal interest. This is different. This is a power imbalance, whereby putting the two together is a bad idea. Carl Joseph Walker Hoover's counselor said on Monday, I want you to sit down with your aggressor at the lunch table and work this out. And he committed suicide over the weekend. Group treatment is not good for bullies. Bullies support each other when they're in group treatment with other bullies. If they're in group treatment with others who stand up against bullies, you have an entirely different story, and it can be very important and very therapeutic. There's a program that I particularly like called No Bully, created here, nobully.com, created here in San Francisco. And it pulls together solutions teams that include the bully, but the victim is separate, is not involved, but the solutions team involves bystanders and others, prominent kids, who outnumber the bully and come up with positive solutions of what the victim can do. And then they say, now that's what the victim can do. What can you do to help? That's what I'm really interested in. And they say, well, I could talk to her. I could invite her over to my table in the cafeteria. I could say hi to her in the morning when I see her at the bus. Those are great preventative measures that they can take if you get together kids to come up with a solution to stopping it and organize it in that way. There's simple short-term solutions typically don't work, but the evidence that they're finding is that more than 80% of the bullying incidents that happen in the middle school can be resolved. This is a dissertation that just came out. With about 3 weeks, three weekly sessions, and the bullying was stopped through the solutions team. So there are ways to stop it even when it happens, let alone to prevent it before it happens.
Those
Yeah.
ideas, the solution team are on nobully.com.
Yeah, you can go to nobully.com, you can get a video from them, and they do training. And the training, they're doing it locally. They want to expand to the East Coast. That's why I've been in touch with them. And the director is Nicholas Carlisle of nobully.com. And it's one of the programs that can be very effective. Bullying can be difficult to see. I won't take time. I want to shorten this. Part of the reason that adults don't deal with it is that it's not yet bullying, or it's indirect bullying, and they don't see that as direct bullying, or it's out of sight. Bullies are very careful to choose unsupervised places, or they deny that it's bullying. Well, we don't have any bullying in our school. I don't see it. I look the other way. Or it's unreported, and therefore it isn't happening. Or there's silence on bullying, and there's a conspiracy of silence. There's a culture of silence, and we want to break through that. These are some of the reasons many victims or bystanders don't tell anyone. They may be embarrassed. They may not want to appear weak or believe they deserve it. They want to belong. They fear retaliation. My wife is a clinical child psychologist, and she works in a district in which they say, snitches get stitches, and they mean it. Well, this isn't snitching. This is an act of compassion and courage to stand up. This is reporting, and they need to understand that. But they also might need protection of anonymity, perhaps, or of at least confidentiality of who is speaking up, because otherwise the bully could turn on them. This is the first activity. I'm going to give you just a rundown of what you can do with this toolkit. The first one is, how do you get your child to talk about bullying? There's a taboo against it. Most kids don't want, because you see the culture of silence. You don't just go and say, hey, were you bullied? Tell me about any bullying that's going on in your school. That's probably not going to work with your child. What we recommend is you talk about your own instances of bullying, your own experience. Say, I remember back to when I watched this act of bullying, and I didn't do anything, and I really wish I had, and here's what it's meant to me. And I've tried to ever since make changes about that. Or yes, I was bullied, and I felt this way, and I didn't go to school. Talk with your child openly in a heartfelt way to make sure that this has the emotion. If you can remember this 20, 30, 40 years later, you can see how important these events are. And they see how important it is, and they see that it's not a taboo topic. And then it opens up the possibility of a swap of stories. Anything like that happening in your school? Well, yeah, today I was bullied by my kid was twisting my nose and saying that my shirt was ugly or whatever. This might open up the channels by you sharing first. Give something before you ask your child to break this taboo and break the ice. There can be, so this is exercise number 1. There can be mutual supporting roles. I'm going to go on to, what we do is we have exercise number 2 is recognizing bullying, and we give a bit of a quiz and a way to recognize what is and what isn't bullying for kids in a way that's visual and verbal, and you can use it with young kids or older kids so that you know what you're talking about. So you're not just using a word that has different meaning for different kids or for different people that you're talking with. That's exercise 2. Exercise 3 addresses this bullying role. We know by testing the habits of thinking of bullies and violent juvenile offenders how they're thinking, and they're thinking very differently about violence than are the kids who are not the bullies. And what this does, this exercise 3, is challenges them, and it allows you as an adult working with the kids to see who is answering this in a way that is setting them up to become a bully or to stick with the bullying they're doing, and to challenge some of these beliefs and say there's alternatives. And some kids say, well, I need to fight back because my parents tell me I need to fight back whenever I'm dissed. But you say, well, maybe they don't mean actually fighting. Maybe they mean standing up for yourself. That's fighting back in a different kind of way. You can challenge the overgeneralizability of kids' beliefs sometimes about what you can do, and the poverty of thought that most people have about violence just by watching these simple, glorified solutions in the media. Tell them about the complexities, but tell them about the possible ways to solve this. So you can select, bullies select vulnerable victims, they selectively train victims, they seek bystanders who are passively accept or actively encourage or join in on the bullying. So they choose their situations very carefully. They can be stopped, however, with assertive victims, and they can be stopped with bystanders who speak up. The victim role is that they're rewarded by the bully inadvertently by submitting. They reward the bully, by inadvertently submitting and showing fear. They don't think they're rewarding. They don't want the violence. They don't want the bullying. But inadvertently, if you take a videotape, as my colleague in Seattle does, with clinical cases of victims of bullying, she says the most painful moment is when they see all the different ways on the video that they are submitting to the bullying, in their body language, in their lack of eye contact, in their soft voice, in their, all of these ways are signs of submission in the crying that happens, and she teaches them to be assertive, and sometimes even somewhat preemptive, to say, for example, well, what's it going to be today? You're going to tease me about my shirt or my nose? The bully might say, well, this isn't any fun anymore for this kid, I'll switch to another one. So changing all of those submissive behaviors can be very important. Victims fail to find support from bystanders or adults. This is where they need to reach out, because they can defeat the bully by responding assertively, by reporting the bullying, by finding support from bystanders and adults. The victim's role is then taught in exercise number 4. This is the alternatives. You have a little bullying scenario. Giving in is submissive. Hurting back is aggressive. Standing up, however, is assertive, and there's a whole range of assertive options that kids can think of, can learn, and can work out with you. This can be done with preschoolers or with high schoolers. Who's at high risk for victimization? The answer is really anybody could be at high risk, but we've already seen that it's the children who are chosen as being less powerful and therefore vulnerable, for all the ways that you mentioned, as well as for some other ways. In fact, the victimization of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender students is out of sight in our country. This is one of the areas that needs to change, and change rapidly. There are ways that are being formed in schools with gay, lesbian, straight task forces and groups, meetings, support groups. Those can be very effective and can offer support. However, we need to also stop the bullying. 90% in the 2007 report of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender students say that they were verbally harassed. 50% physically harassed in the last year. 25% physically assaulted, and 50% report being cyberbullied. The vast majority reported being sexually harassed and or relationally bullied. So the data are out of sight in terms of this group being vulnerable, and we all know about some famous, not famous, but popular, reported in the media cases of bulicides, as we've already said, for kids who are called gay, lesbian, bisexual, or other demeaning terms related to that. Bystander role, and this is one of the things I'm concluding with now, is they often support bullying by silent watching, by actively encouraging, by instigating, or by joining in. They don't think that they're necessarily responsible. If they're silently watching, they think, well, I'm neutral. They're not neutral at all. If you're silently watching bullying and doing nothing, you're supporting it. You're permitting it to happen and to grow. They can prevent or stop bullying by speaking up, reporting the victim, getting help from other bystanders or adults, or reporting the bullying. Bystander roles also are pivotal. Most bullying incidents, the bystanders possess advanced information. So this is a key opportunity for prevention. Also, they're often present during bullying. The data shows that most bullying incidents happen in the view of bystanders. They're often unaware of their influence, and they frequently support violence without realizing it or intending to do so. But they're the key and the pivotal group that can either promote it or prevent it, depending on how they respond. So if you're a parent, and you come to this issue of bullying, as most parents do, saying, well, what if my child is victimized? That's what I worry about. But yeah, what if your child is the bully? There have to be bullies. Your child could be one of those. Let's make sure that isn't going to happen. And then you say, well, what if your child is the bystander? And they say, well, what do you mean? So what? But I think when you see the power of the bystander, you want your child, you want to teach your child and empower your child and yourself to be a bystander, either primary or secondary bystander, who knows how to stand up and stop the bullying before it increases. So the bystanders often play a pivotal role because they're often unprepared. They need practice. They can learn. And they're usually effective when it does happen. We have a little bystander quiz. One of the things where I'm interested is what I call bystander efficacy beliefs. We want children to believe, and we want the adults to believe also, that bystanders can be effective in preventing, the general belief, or stopping. That specifically, there are specific things that can work. And third, that you personally, you yourself, can make these things work if you adapt them appropriately for the situation. What we're calling upon here is the bell for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for you. Empower yourself, empower your children to be ready to stand up and stop the bullying. And a bully cannot continue to engage in bullying if the bystanders stand up against it. Just can't happen. You've eliminated it, and they won't even try it if they believe that the bystanders are going to stand up against it. So it's preventative in that sense. Bullies are not going to engage in bullying when they know that everyone else is trained in standing up against it, all their friends. So it can be preventative or it can be responsive to the bullying when it does occur. You need to teach bystanders that your involvement makes a difference. You can stand up for a person being bullied. Don't join in, help. These are all available to you in the toolkit. They're also available on your handouts. But here's the bystander quiz, for example. This is one activity you can do with your kids. True or false? Most kids watch bullying and do nothing to try to stop it. True. Data. Bystanders stood up for the victim only 10% to 19% of the time in a study that was done by Deborah Pepler in Canada on the playground looking at actual naturalistic observations. Instead, bystanders acted as silent witnesses 54% of the time. They were letting it happen. And they joined in the bullying with words and actions 21% of the time. So the bystanders could be helping, but in this data, they weren't. Hopefully now they're beginning to get the message and the data are changing from these earlier studies. Another quiz, true or false? Kids who laugh at or cheer on bullying usually make things worse. True. Kids who stop bullying usually make things better. Now here's the study that shows that when bystanders intervene to stand up for the victim, saying, that's not cool, or we don't do that here, or hey, stop that. They were successful in stopping the bullying more than 50% of the time, usually within the first 10 seconds of their intervention. I'd ask you as parents, how often if you suggest to your middle school child to wear a jacket that day, are you successful more than 50% of the time within the first 10 seconds? No, probably not. But kids listen to other kids, and if someone has the courage to stand up and say, no, we don't do that here, then it's likely to stop. Anchorage, Alaska, using a program we've developed, Aggressors, Victims, and Bystanders, following on to a bullicide that their school district settled out of court on, has now cut their bullying in less than half since the training in 2004, and they continue to reduce it every year. One example you'll find on the website if you go to Anchorage School District, ASDK12.org. You'll find, go to middle link, and you'll find the data. You'll find all kinds of books and supplies and things that they've learned. But you'll also find a testimonial, one little story I'll tell you about. A girl who was in one of the schools that had the most diversity in terms of socioeconomic differences. It was the rich homes and the trailer parks. And one of the, I think of the 8th grader boy was bullying the 6th grade trailer park boy. And after the training, this girl came up said, what the hell do you think you're doing? She said, you're bullying that kid. And he said, oh, geez, I didn't know you care, and sorry. And she says, well, you have a lot of nerve saying you're sorry to me. You have to say you're sorry to him. And he goes down the hall and he says he's sorry. And the girl never reports it to her mother. Why? Because she swore. And the mother heard about it from the other girl who was watching her do this. So you'll see this testimonial written up, but there's one word changed to protect the girl. What the heck do you think you're doing? She said, according to this story that with one word changed. But that's an example of a very assertive bystander who turned the tables, and by the way, anybody who was watching that learned a lesson. Learned, you're not going to get away with bullying here, especially in front of this girl. So that's what can happen. They can be effective. And work with your children with the bystander quiz and others to say, how can you prepare yourself? I'm ending with this, really, which is the bystander strategy. I've come to apply it in a wide variety of ways. I'll be glad to talk about it some other time with you if you're interested. We have programs that are going in to stop men's violence against women in the Army, in the Marines, in the professional sports teams using the bystander approach. I'm also on the advisory board for the Turner Broadcasting System, which in October you may have seen premiered there on all 5 stations for the first time in their history. They had a campaign called StopBullyingSpeakUp.com. If you go to StopBullyingSpeakUp.com, you'll find a variety of resources, including our Eyes on Bullying as one of the partners. But one of the things I was happiest about is convincing them to take on the most important strategy that they could have adopted, the bystander strategy. And instead of, as they originally said, well, why don't we put Michael Phelps on to say I was bullied as a kid, which he's talking about in schools, because my ears stuck out, I was lanky, I had learning problems, but now I'm okay. I said, no, that is just a cruel message for a kid who's being bullied, ineffective. He won 6 gold medals. I can only identify with winning 5. And besides, he looks pretty good. And he got through it, and maybe it was the bullying that even led him to have the determination to do this. That's not me. That's not my situation, is what a bullied kid is going to say. On the other hand, if you have Michael Phelps with the bystander approach, just shift it slightly, and here's the message. I'm Michael Phelps. I was bullied as a kid. 6 gold medals and so on, whatever. And here's the kid who made all the difference to me. He's my quiet hero. He stood up for me when I needed help, when he had a little more power than I did to turn the tables. I haven't even thanked him for it, and I'm going to thank him now. You could be that kid too. You can stand up. You can be a quiet hero. Now that's a message that speaks to everyone, and that's the kind of messages that we're putting forth on all of the Turner broadcasting stations, together with this, using the bystander strategy to help stop bullying in the Stop Bullying, Speak Up initiative. The bystander strategy is nothing less than a new pedagogic method. I truly believe that now. I started off thinking small, and little by little I saw the power of it and how it works. And it's teaching by way of putting you in a third-party position, so you can see the forest instead of just the tree in front of you. It's giving you, some people have formalized this by saying learning through distancing, that you can be more objective and you can see the whole system by getting a little bit of a distance as a bystander does from that perspective. It also means that it really works not just to train bystanders, but to put the bullies and the victims into the role of bystanders, because then they begin to see the system connection to it. And so when we introduced the bystander strategy way back in 1989, it's now taken over and is being used, I think, rightfully as not only one of the primary strategies for bullying prevention, but I do think it's being used and ought to be expanded even further into the area of pedagogy, different ways of educating kids about social problems like this. It avoids blame. There's no finger wagging. If you wag a finger at a bully, it used to be that we American psychologists, and I'll include myself to some degree in that, way back when we were first looking at this, we were saying, well, bullies are aggressive, so you're too aggressive, we're going to change you. That's the solution here. Don't wag a finger at anybody that you want to have change their behavior, especially a bully. They're not going to change, but you begin to see the relationship. And so Dan Olveus in Norway took on the connection between the bully and the victim, and it revolutionized our thinking to see that the bully selects particular victims, and that the victim becomes trained, and even worse than the bruises that the victim suffers is the mentality change that they undergo by being victimized by a bully, so that they believe that there's only 2 choices, winner and loser. I'm the loser now, give me a gun, I'll be the winner, is what they think. Is that mother who trains her next generation of kids to go and knock out her 2 front teeth or you don't get in the house that night. This is the mentality of a victim, and that leads the victim to be repeatedly selected, and they need help to get out of this. So you need a certain kind of education for the bully you need a certain kind of education for the victim perspective, and one of the best ways is to put them into the third role of the bystander and begin to look at this overall system and how it works. And the last lesson in our series on the Eyes on Bullying toolkit is what if? It's looking at the whole system of bullying and getting the kids to understand it. And what if this changed? What would happen then? To think ahead and then to begin to see, well, you know, this isn't carved in stone. It doesn't have to happen this way. I can intervene and the outcome will be different. It's nothing less than a new pedagogic strategy that avoids blame. It involves all children and adults. It presents the widest range of options. It offers third-party objectivity and distancing. It fosters social perspective taking. This is one of the goals of almost every educational protocol that teachers face, is teach social perspective taking so that you can switch roles and think about it from a different pair of shoes, different set of eyes. Think of it through the eyes of a different party. Think of it in a way that maybe leads the bully to empathize, to think of, well, what would it be like to be the victim? These are social perspective taking skills that kids desperately need and that enhance the bullying prevention initiative. It also defines the prevailing social norms, the bystander does, that is. What is a norm anyway? Social scientists talk about it as though the norm is in this room or in the air or in the vents or somewhere in the posters on the wall. No, Paducah, Kentucky had blood-splattered violence prevention posters. That wasn't a norm. A norm is what you and I believe a bystander, a third-party person, will sanction or not sanction. That's what a norm is. What will a person, reasonable person or a third-party person, accept? And if a bully feels that bullying is acceptable here, they're going to do it. If they feel like bullying is not acceptable, I'm not going to even try it. The social norm changes, and you can have a climate change in the school whereby you take pride in saying, we don't do that here. We don't bully. And if we see bullying, we're going to report it. And maybe better yet, like in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, where Fred Poteet, one of the designers of this program, spoke about, is he found that you can reward the kids. He said, you wouldn't believe the impact on the community when I bring a kid into the office and say, you won the Bullying Preventer Award for this month, and you can take your dinner out to the local Long John Silver's. He said, here's a kid in a trailer park taking his whole family out because he was the bullying preventer. He said, you wouldn't believe what a community response you get from doing something like that. So you can reward bullying preventers for what they ought to be doing. It calls for, the early research on bystanders said, you know, the more people there are, the more diffuse your responsibility is. If there's 2 people there, then you have 50% of the responsibility as a bystander to whether you're going to intervene. If there are 10 people, you have only 10%. That was the idea. What we're calling upon is reversing that, so that instead of a diffusion of responsibility, there is an infusion of responsibility. That we say, you have responsibility here, and here's how you can carry it out, and we'll be proud of you and reward you. And then it builds a school-wide social climate for preventing bullying. And last and not least, it really exemplifies the ideals of participatory democracy. We've heard a lot about democracy lately and what it means. But what it means is we the people. Participatory democracy. Not we the rich people, or we the people with power, or we the people who can do what we want in our legislation. It's we the people, and in order to perform the ideals of participatory democracy and live up to them, we should hold ourselves and our children responsible and apply it to the area of bullying and bullying prevention. Everyone has something to learn. Bullies have to learn empathy, respect, positive ways. Victims have to learn assertiveness rather than submission or counteraggression. Bystanders need to learn that their own actions make a difference and then how to help. And adults need to learn to recognize bullying, communicate, educate, and respond effectively. This is one of my favorite quotes. Ida B. Wells was an African-American scholar and an anti-lynching activist who wrote passionately about lynchings in America, the extreme form of violent harm-doing and bullying. And she said the eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Thank you.
As the Gay Straight Alliance founder and advisor for 15 years, as well as being a member of the Santa Cruz City Schools LBGT Task Force, Ron co-authored the AB 537, the Compliance Policy for Santa Cruz City Schools. Ron is also the AB 537 Enforcement Officer on campus. Additionally, Ron is consultant to Santa Cruz City Schools, Pajaro Valley Unified School District, UC Santa Cruz, California State University at Monterey Bay, and the Santa Cruz Office of Education on LGBT issues. He is an active teacher union representative and former officer of the Director of Safe Schools Project of Santa Cruz County and the Middle Schools Project of Santa Cruz County, both funded by the Community Foundation of Santa Cruz County. Please welcome me in joining, would you please join me in welcoming Ron Indra.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the other presenter named Ron, so I guess you could call me Ron 2, the sequel. I have to tell you, I feel a real kinship to my fellow presenter today, in more than just name. For you see, for years, when I introduce myself to people and they ask me what I do for a living, I tell them I teach at Harbor. And invariably, I get echoed back to me, Harvard, very impressive. And I just nod. So I feel like I've been on the Harvard faculty for these past 28 years. And since I've taught a law class at Harbor, that would logically make me a Harvard law professor as well. But I digress. They've asked me here today to do 3 tasks. Bring you up to speed on current affairs with regards to bullying in Santa Cruz County, what's presently being done in the county on this issue, and what still needs to be done. And one of my areas of expertise is LGBTQIQ issues. So let me define that for you. It's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, intersexed, and queer. And the last 2 terms are new to a lot of people. So let me define them for you. Intersex refers to people who are born with physical expressions of both gender, what we formerly used to term as hermaphrodite. That term has been politically or moved into the area of politically incorrect. Queer is an old term with many definitions, but it's currently a term that LGBT youth have co-opted to refer to themselves. It's an umbrella term for young sexual minorities, gender or sexual orientation non-conforming. So, before I begin too, I just want to remind you today how perfectly timed this is for our symposium, the hospital, all of the people here with the president speaking yesterday. That's huge, and the First Lady, and to have a whole day symposium at the White House. So you definitely need to go home tonight and friend them. They have a Facebook page now, stopbullying.gov, and join in for all sorts of information and ideas on helping with bullying, as well as all the resources Ron gave us earlier. Before I begin, I just want to show you a few faces of some successful kids, as you see on the screen. These are kids who have made it, who've made contributions to our community and to fellow students and peers. These are kids who've overcome prejudice and discrimination and bullying, and they're making a difference. They're making a positive contributions to other youth, and to our community. And while I want to celebrate these outstanding young people, I want you to understand that for every successful student there is on that screen today, there are hundreds of faceless young people who you will not see unless you work with them. These are the invisible children, the invisible young people who live lives of hopelessness and despair and character-crushing agony. That is why we're here today, to talk about helping all kids to meet their full potential. Some of those faceless kids, invisible kids, just might be yours, and you may not even be aware. So what's happening here? What's the state of the county in Santa Cruz? Well, I come to you today with some good news and with some bad news. The good news is that we have more out students than ever before. We have more students coming out earlier than ever before. And we have students identifying not only as gay, but also as bisexual and transgender. We have GSA, Gay Straight Alliances, or clubs, if you will, in many of our schools. And we have anti-bullying working policies, work being done both in the county throughout and in our schools. The bad news, however, is that our beautiful little Santa Cruz is not the tolerant, diverse, and accepting place we want to believe that it is. We still have a ways to go. As many of you are aware, we still do have students that are bullied and harassed and subjected to discrimination, ranging from verbal abuse to physical and sexual assault. Our community has students who are truant because they do not feel safe at school. And we have students who drop out because they're being bullied or harassed or victims of discrimination. Many of us see students being physically abused, bullied, and then thrown out of their own homes by their own families. Homeless youth trading unsafe sex for a place to stay. Students who suffer from depression and hopelessness as a result of bullying. And students who are physically abusive to themselves. Students who are suicidal. And many of us work with students with high drug and alcohol use that can be directly attributed to the feelings of worthlessness and of depression. And we have all worked with our sheriff's young people who are giving up on life and themselves, and so they engage in unsafe sex. Local studies have tell us the following, and before I give you these percentages, I want you to bear in mind, I want you to keep in mind that we're talking about 38,500 students approximately in Santa Cruz County. These are our children. 38% of our school children have feelings ranging from neutral to not safe at all when asked how safe do you feel at schools on a daily basis. 28% report they've been victimized by hurtful, destructive rumors or slurs. 39% say they were common targets of sexual jokes, comments, or gestures. 22% were targeted because of their physical appearance. 18% of our young people say that they were targets of physical violence. 8% have been threatened by weapons. 18% were victims of harassment due to religion, race, or ethnicity. 9% because of their gender. 76% because of their sexual orientation. 34% because of their weight, 33% because of their class or socioeconomic status. 49% of these students who reported being bullied said that they were frequently pushed or shoved or struck or had possessions knocked out of their possessions or taken from them. Over 33% said they felt safe at school most of the time. Only a third felt safe at school most of the time. And only 35% said they knew where to go to get help at school when they were being harassed or bullied or a victim of discrimination. 44% of the students have witnessed physical harassment. 40% heard slurs by teachers and school officials or other adults in authority. Our young people tell us that only 20% of the teachers stop verbal abuses or slurs in the classroom every time. That's 1/5. And to the statement, my teachers and administrators are responsive to my needs when I'm being harassed, and to the statement, my teachers and administrators make me feel safe at school, only 36% of the students answered in the positive range, just over a third. We still do have school staff and parents and law enforcement that either do not want to help the problem, address the problem or who want to help but lack the necessary training to help our youth, to assist our youth in any meaningful way. And this is a serious problem for all of us because current trends at the national and state level have moved from one of education to one of action. We're facing a serious wake-up call. A number of national organizations that once helped train us and helped educate us on these issues are now moving towards legal action as their priority for protecting our youth. They're filing lawsuits and they're winning lawsuits in the multi-million-dollar range against schools, administrators, those who work with our youth and fail to protect them. And in each one of these cases, insurance companies who insure these organizations have refused to pay the damages, stating that the organizations fail to protect the child's safety, their number one objective. Everyone from school officials to government agents have been held personally liable for the damages. Now, what's presently being done in Santa Cruz County? I direct the Safe Schools Project and the Middle Schools Project of Santa Cruz County, both wonderfully set up by the Community Foundation. So we maintain a website 24/7, which serves as a vital resource for students, kids, parents, staff, administrators on LGBT and anti-bullying topics and issues. We conduct ongoing surveys asking our young people about their feelings of safety, how often they're harassed and bullied. And some of these figures I mentioned above came from these surveys. We have safe school liaisons on our campuses at Santa Cruz City Schools and at Pajaro Valley Unified School District. And these are identified go-to people on our campuses that kids know will get them help. Kids know who these people are and they know how to get them help. We have community action team members throughout the county. These are high-profile individuals in the county who stand for our LGBT and bullied students when they're not being protected. They're doctors and lawyers and business executives and religious leaders who will attend meetings to intervene and protect our kids and ask the difficult questions. And, oh, by the way, we can always use a lot more of you, so give me a call if you'd like to help out. School sites at Santa Cruz City Schools and Pajaro Valley Unified School District are equipped with safe school resource binders to help adults help kids. These binders are designed for counselors and teachers and administrators to help students and staff and parents and administrators when they need to intervene on behalf of our kids. We train school boards and we train administrators and entire staffs at an individual site. We train the new teachers at UC Santa Cruz, and we work with students at CSUMB about the laws and regulations of AB 537, the California Student Safety and Violence Protection Act of 2000 that specifically addresses bullying and discrimination and harassment. We teach them how to identify bullying and how to effectively intervene, giving them thoughtful techniques, and how to create safe places for our students. And a great deal of our work is putting out fires, interventions, and we intervene on behalf of individual students, on behalf of parents who don't know where to go to help or need our help, staff members and administrators, LGBTQIQ students, parents and staff, those perceived as LGBT, those who have been bullied because of their weight or their height or their gender or their race or their creed or their national origin, you name it, we've had them all. We get many of these calls from these kids, from parents, from staff members by default, because there doesn't seem to be any other resource for our youth, or our youth don't know where to go for help. We work closely with district offices at Santa Cruz City Schools and Pajaro Valley Unified School District, as well as the Santa Cruz County Office of Education. Now, in addition to our work, there's other things going out there, and that's exciting. A number of schools have had professional anti-bullying performances on school campuses. Watsonville High School's drama department in the past has created their own plays addressing the issues, and then they often take it on the road to other schools. As many of you have probably read in the paper, Aptos Junior High is on the cutting edge and has developed an anti-bullying bracelet campaign spearheaded by Leslie Smith, an extraordinary teacher and youth advocate there. Students have signed pledges and wear bracelets identifying themselves as allies to those bullied. allies who will intervene on behalf of the victim or go get help. A number of schools have adopted these bracelets, including Harbor High. Go Leslie. We wear them at our school. Aptos Junior High has also been in the paper because students have been victimized there, one in particular with serious cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is a whole new area of concern for schools and all those who work with our children, as is bullying by cell phone. They, like other schools, are attempting to deal with this new problem in an area that confounds experts and government leaders alike. Gay Straight Alliances, these are Gay Straight Alliance clubs, organizations, now reach down from our high schools all the way down to our junior highs. Mission Hill and B40 middle schools have begun GSAs. And Aptos Junior High, again, a shining example, has had a club for years. These clubs are critical in supporting LGBT kids and developing allies for all kids on our campus. They're on the front lines creating proactive bystanders. This year, Santa Cruz City Schools and Pajaro Valley Unified School District are partnering with Cisco in participating in GLSEN's national campaign called No Name Calling, the National Week of Anti-Bullying Awareness. This is a curriculum-based program, K-12, that is directly addressing bullying in schools. The program is endorsed by every national and state educational organization in the country, and we're hoping to grow this program in both districts. Much of this is because of the efforts of Eileen Brown at Santa Cruz City Schools and Murray Scheckman at Pajaro Valley Unified School District. Anti-bullying training has begun at Pajaro Valley Unified School District for all staff under the direction of Murray there. On March 19th, the Diversity Center and Strange are putting on their annual LGBT Youth Conference at Mission Hill Middle School. The conference is designed to help and train our youth, our teachers, our counselors, our staff to support youth. I invite you to attend if you want to know more. There's going to be a ton of information and workshops to participate in. Classrooms in our schools have safe school posters up, AB 537 posters, and complaint forms readily available for our students who are bullied. Our youth receive support and encouragement from the many programs at the Diversity Center of Santa Cruz County and at the LGB youth organization Strange. Strange was established by the Santa Cruz Community Counseling Center to support queer youth and their projects. Our sheriff, Phil Wowak, and his entire department here in Santa Cruz are dedicated and committed to helping protecting our children and having responded quickly and effectively to bullying incidences. We have SRO, school resource officers on our high school campuses, and they have been in service and they support our LGBT youth and youth that are being bullied. I'm also happy to report to you today that we also are very, very blessed in this county to have places of worship like Temple Bethel and Inner Light Ministries. For that matter, all the participating members of Out in Our Faith, standing for our children, standing for your children. These are 22 open and affirming places of worship for all people celebrating diversity. The Triangle Speakers Program is celebrating 20 years of diversity education, training, and service to the community this year. They teach diversity and acceptance to youth in our schools and to community organizations at large. They have put on over 1,500 panels and have reached more than 45,000 people in our community. Our local chapter of Planned Parenthood took an early active stand on this issue and continues to support our youth in the county. They have been one of the first at the table every time when it comes to standing for the safety and health of our youth. Cabrillo College has established its first GSA and hosted its first gay prom and has ongoing staff diversity training program. UCSC and the Cantu Center, wow, what can I say about them? They have set the standard. They have sponsored a myriad of diversity training and activities on campus as well as in our communities, and they have done so from the very beginning. The Queer Youth Task Force of Santa Cruz County, headed by Stuart Rosenstein, hosts the annual Quila Awards Dinner, the Queer Youth Leadership Awards Dinner. Since 1998, LGBT youth had been celebrated and recognized by the community for their contributions to their schools and for all that they do for our community. The task force also has been instrumental in connecting our kids with diversity events here in the county and over the hill in the Bay Area. Now, I know there's a lot more being done in the county, but we lack the coordinated effort. We have no central organization, no central clearinghouse to coordinate all our efforts. And considering how limited our resources are these days, that's not only tragic, but I think it's a huge disservice to our youth and to all of us who serve them, that we have no unified, focused effort to address this issue. Finally, there's still so much more that needs to be done. What we need is an action plan. We need to make Santa Cruz County a place where children can thrive, a place for all children to excel and live out their dreams, a community where our children, your children, can live a holistic, full life, safe from the moment when they wake up in the morning until they go to sleep at night. No, actually, I think our kids deserve better than that. They deserve to feel safe while they're asleep at night. To accomplish this vision, we need a county-wide, comprehensive, effective, consistent anti-bullying policy, one that celebrates diversity. This policy needs clear procedures and definitions. It needs to include training for all our adults who work with our children. The curriculum needs to include everything from awareness training through effective intervention and education for all of us who work with them, on to counseling for all impacted in the bullying paradigm. While the policy must be strongly enforced, it must include enforcement with a heart, which means education and counseling assistance for bullies as well. Young people need to have access to LGBT and anti-bullying resources, and they need to be informed of their rights and their responsibilities, empowering them to stand for themselves, to stand for others, and to know where to go to get help. We need a confidential reporting system for victims and bystanders. We need all adults working with our kids to ask those tough questions when they talk with the kids. Do you feel safe? How can I help you? How can I make you feel more safe? We need a policy with teeth to support the rhetoric, a policy that is action-based and proactive. We need institutional changes, not Band-Aids, a policy with consequences for those who violate it and help for those impacted. A system-wide policy that is embraced and supported and enforced from our mayor and supervisors and other elected officials on down through all the organizations that interact with our kids. When our community leaders enforce such policies, they empower the bystanders and the victims. They help educate bullies. Without such a policy and enforcement, the community joins the ranks of the silent bystanders, and those bullied get the very clear message that they're not safe, they're not important, and they're not worthy of being protected. When adults fail to act, they become the silent bystanders, empowering the bullies and leaving the victims and other bystanders to these events alone, powerless, and in despair. The policy needs to move from tolerance of others through acceptance to the final goal of celebrating all diversity. I want to see Santa Cruz County totally as a safe place for all our children, for all of your children, but not only in our schools, but on our streets and in our homes, in places where our children go to play, to participate in sports, in all youth organizations, places of work and worship. This policy has begun in our schools, and with the full community support, it can expand out into all these other areas in the community that touch all aspects of our young people's lives. Only then will Santa Cruz County truly be accepting and tolerant and a diverse community that all of us can be proud of, knowing the safety and health, both mental and emotional and physical, of all our youth can be ensured. Thank you.